We're at chapter 7 of our deep dive in Shepherding a Child's Heart, and we're deep into the book now. Here, Tripp is going to talk about discarding unbiblical methods. And Kelsey has talked a good amount about how many parenting books are reactionary and how this one responded to a certain moment in time. And I think that's worth noting here. This came out in the mid-90s when I do think there was a big market really beginning with Dobson in the 70s and 80s, but then exploding of different parenting techniques. And you can see this even in the vocabulary shift from maybe more commonly understood of just child rearing or child training to mid 1900s. You see a shift to parenting. It becomes an identity factor for a parent rather than a goal of raising a child. It's about being a parent. And then there's all these different methods. And many of the parenting experts of the 80s and 90s are really grappling with how do we respond to this push for self-esteem in children? And is that a Christian idea? And what do we do with that? Anyway, in this chapter, Tripp is going to just basically name all the elements that he believes are unbiblical. And so he looks at pop psychology, so maybe bribery. He calls maybe positive rewards bribery. He names it as bribery because they don't deal with a biblical approach to deal with the motivations of the heart. Same thing with behavior modification, so kind of consequences, talks about the problems with a punitive approach like grounding, and then just the inconsistency of these different approaches. So many parenting books, Christian and not Christian alike, are going to evaluate whatever the methods of the time are and kind of analyze them. So Tripp is doing that here. For our purposes, it's important to see what he finds lacking in them. And what he finds lacking in them again and again is that the heart remains unaddressed. And so he is very consistent in his through line where he says, look, the goal of parenting is you're acting as God's agent to impact the heart of your child. And so if a method doesn't get at the heart of your child, then it's not biblical. So that's just going to be pretty clear line, so everything he primarily is going to offer methods of biblical discipline that he believes are going to shape the heart in order to get behavioral change that demonstrates godliness and obedience. This is a standard nouthetic approach, right? Remember, everything is a sin issue. So the idea is you have to diagnose the root problem. You have to figure out what the sin issue is. You've got to put off the bad stuff. You've got to put on the right stuff. And this is what it means to live in relationship with God. So Ted is going to use the framing and say that your child, he says on page 67, is a covenantal creature. And he uses, from where I'm sitting, it's a lot of Christianese. He gives an example. This is how it practically works out for Ted. The problem is a child's failure to do his homework. He's going to make it a sin issue. He's going to say, okay, here's how we walk through this. A bribery approach, which would be a threat or a positive reinforcement, an emotional approach that makes it about the parent's feelings, a punitive approach that threatens consequences, behavior modification approach, like trying to manipulate a child's behavior, or, kind of some other approaches he gives. And so he's going to offer the solution, which actually is pretty Christianese laden, that says we're going to bring the child to the cross in this. So there's no practical tool offered here for parents. And I want to underscore that because I'm thinking of a parent reading this who's saying, yeah, how do I get my kid to do his homework if they're not doing it? Isn't that kind of my job as a parent to help do this? And Ted's going to offer, we need to give the life-giving truth that God sent his son to set people free from sin. And we need to teach our children the gospel and train their hearts toward Christ and the cross. But we don't have anywhere here, I'm just skimming just to make sure, we don't have anywhere here what this looks like for the child who didn't do their homework. So I'm left to fill in the blanks. I don't know how you would fill in the blanks, that the parent's going to end up relying on one of those methods Ted listed, but it's going to come along with a heavy dose of Christianese to make it about the gospel. or it's going to be spiritual manipulation that says you need to do this or else you're not a good Christian, or you disappoint God somehow. So obey your parents and obey God, and God will be pleased with you.